Endocrine System by Dylan, George, and Coy. What is the endocrine system? It is the collection of glands that produce hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue function, sexual functions, reproduction, sleep, and mood, among other things. Endocrine cells. Target cells respond to a particular hormone. Receptors. In order to respond, you must have a receptor cell, protein on the inside or outside that fits with the hormone, like a lock key. An example: the stimulus, rise in blood glucose levels above the set point. The receptor, insulin secreting cells in the pancreas. Insulin released into the blood. And the response, most body cells take up glucose, removing it from the blood. Homeostasis, blood glucose level returns to set point. The response causes stimulus high blood glucose levels to be reduced, which turns into negative feedback back to the receptor.
Regulation types. Upregulation. Target cells make more receptors. Cell becomes more sensitive to hormone. Downregulation. Target cells make less receptors and are less sensitive to hormone. The control of hormone release. Endocrine gland stimuli. Humoral. Level of ions and nutrients are monitored, and hormones are released to maintain homeostasis. Example: blood sugar level, insulin, and glucagon. Neural. Neurons stimulate the release of hormones. Example: epinephrine and norepinephrine. Hormonal. The hormones from one endocrine gland stimulate the release of hormones from another gland. Example: pituitary stimulates gonads to stimulate other hormones. Uses negative feedback. Nervous system modulation. Nerves can override some hormonal controls.
Alright, today me and Dylan are going to go over the anterior and posterior pituitary gland. We're going to start off with growth hormones, which targets general body cells, which causes growth in bones and muscles. Then we're going to go to the thyroid stimulating hormones, which targets the thyroid gland. Which then produces T3 and T4, which then targets general body cells, which raises your BMR. We're also going to go over ACTH, which then targets the cortex of the adrenal gland. Which then produces cortisol, which then targets general body cells, which then promotes healing.
All right, so the next hormone we're going to talk about is FSH and LH, which targets the gonads and causes hormone and gamete production. Next is PRL, prolactin, which targets breast, which then causes a couple things: milk production and milk lactation. Now, that was the anterior pituitary gland. Next is the posterior, and we start out with ADH, antidiuretic hormone, which targets the kidneys and causes reuptake of H2O. Next is OXY, oxytocin, which targets the uterus and causes labor contractions. Now, in the adrenal cortex, it produces aldosterone, which targets, let's go all the way over here, to the kidneys at ADH, which then causes reuptake of sodium.
This is the anterior
And this is the posterior
pituitary hormones.
I will be covering some clinical problems with the endocrine system. Endocrine disorders are typically grouped into two categories. One category being a gland produces too much or too little of a hormone, causing a hormone imbalance. These are often from genetic disorders, a problem with the endocrine feedback system, diseases, injuries, and other things. The other category is being the development of lesions in the endocrine system. Sometimes tumors and nodules may appear and disrupt the gland's hormone production. Now, I will go over some disorders. The first one is Cushing's disease. Cushing's disease happens when the pituitary gland releases too much ACTH. ACTH stimulates the production and release of a stress hormone called cortisol, which comes from the adrenal cortex. This can lead to upper body obesity, a round full face, mental changes, fatigue, and a high blood pressure. Treatments may include various medications that inhibit cortisol, radiation therapy, and possibly surgery. The second disorder I'll be covering is gigantism. Gigantism is caused by too much growth hormone during childhood. This is often because of benign tumor in the pituitary gland. When someone has gigantism, they will grow at a rapid rate and become very, very tall. People have seen to be even grown above 7 foot. A famous person who had gigantism was a famous wrestler, Andre the Giant, who was about 7'4". Treatments may include medications that reduce or block growth hormone release, radiation therapy, or even surgery to remove the tumor. The next one is very common, hypothyroidism. This is when the thyroid gland does not produce enough thyroid hormone. It is estimated around 10 million Americans are likely to have this medical condition. People with hypothyroidism are seen to always have fatigue, weight gain, generally feel cold a lot, hair loss, and a general weakness. Since this disorder is very common, there's been a lot of research and work gone into treatments. The most common treatment is taking levothyroxine. It is basically a man-made version of the thyroid hormone, thyroxine, or T4. It acts just like the natural hormone and has been proven to have great results. The last one is diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is a result of inadequate output of the hormone ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. Generally, it causes an imbalance of fluids in the body. Someone with diabetes insipidus will have extreme thirst and produce large amounts of urine. It also may lead to dehydration from the constant removal of fluids. If you have a mild case, you can increase your water intake to prevent this. But in more severe cases, someone could take desmopressin that would replace their antidiuretic hormone and decrease urination.